Welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Glad that you could join us again. Going to have a conversation this evening with Mr. Walter Denton. He's joining us on the program to talk about his sarcoma diagnosis, swim across America, and how he and his family have taken a challenging situation and turned it into a family and community philanthropic effort. Welcome to Health Professional Radio. Walter Denton, how are you?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Great. I'm glad that you could join us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your sarcoma diagnosis.
Okay. Well, my name is Walter Denton. I'm 49 years old. I live in O'Fallon, Illinois, which is a suburb of St. Louis. About 5 years ago, I had a lump on my upper leg, just above my knee, on my femur. And I thought it was a sports injury of some kind from working out. And so I went to the doctor. We had some x-rays done, and then they thought it looked kind of strange, did an MRI. It turned out to be a mass, so had the biopsy done, and it was bone cancer the precise name of it was undifferentiated pleomorphic sarcoma. So I had the tumor removed, the femur removed, and after a series of surgeries, I now have a metal femur and had a total knee replacement with a metal knee, and so that and about 9 months of chemotherapy. So that took care of the cancer that was in my leg, but then about 9 months after I finished chemotherapy, there was I had a blood cancer, an MDS, that was caused from the chemotherapy that I had before. So I needed a stem cell transplant about 4 years ago, and had a stem cell transplant that turned out to be 100% engrafted, so it was successful. And so that was going pretty well. And then about a year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with a recurrence of the sarcoma in my hip bone, right hip bone. And so then I had chemotherapy for most of last summer, and then last year around September I started using a immunotherapy called Keytruda, and I've been doing that ever since.
So you've had quite a journey. How were you able to pick a team that was successful in your treatment? I mean, you thought you had a sports injury. Was it diagnosed properly as soon as you went to the doctor to find out more, or was there some back and forth with diagnoses?
Well, we're fortunate here, since I live in the St. Louis area, that we have world-class hospitals and cancer doctors just right here in St. Louis. So my primary doctor, when he saw that it was not just a sports injury, that it was a mass or a tumor of some kind on my bone, that he got in touch with orthopedic surgeons he knew, that sent me to an orthopedic oncologist over in St. Louis, who is one of the best. And then there happens to be a doctor in St. Louis at the Siteman Cancer Center in St. Louis who is a specialist in sarcoma. So I really didn't have to go anywhere or search far, that we had such excellent physicians here to take care of me.
Now, you talked about all of these procedures that you've had in a relatively short period of time. What would you say was the most difficult part of your cancer journey? You're still going through it.
Well, right. So I'm still getting cancer treatments every 3 weeks of the Keytruda. It's not quite as invasive as it was 5 years ago, or with the surgeries and the chemotherapy and stem cell transplant, but I am still going through it. Cancer is, if nothing else, is very inconvenient. You have your life, you have your things you want to do, and cancer has a way of putting all of that in front, behind your disease.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not a young guy, but I'm not old. What was really difficult is facing mortality. When you're 45 years old, that's not something you think about a lot. And so to think about, what's most important in your life, you start thinking about, okay, well, if this doesn't work, what are the things that I'm going to be missing? All the family things, my kids are young, the thought of, will I get to see them graduate from high school, from college, go to their weddings, see grandchildren? How will my wife manage if I'm not able to work and not around? And so,
what impact did it have on your family? I know it had a huge impact on your psyche and your expectations and mortality, but what about your wife and your daughters?
Well, what we tried to do early on, and my kids were young when this was first diagnosed, is that we wanted their lives to remain as normal as possible. They would still go to school, they still have activities, they have sports that they're involved with, and to try to keep that going as much as we can. And we were successful with it, but it was difficult, and there were things that were missed. We spent birthdays and holidays in the hospital when I was in the hospital getting treatment, and that wasn't always the most fun thing in the world, but we tried to deal with it. And I have so much admiration for caregivers, my wife, my mother, my children, and all of our friends who supported us, family, friends, and from our church. And caregivers everywhere are amazing people.
Let's talk about Swim Across America. What is Swim Across America?
Well, Swim Across America is a national organization that does fundraising for cutting-edge cancer research around the country. So there are, I believe, 13 or 15 different Swim Across America events around the country, and they're based in, mostly in the larger cities, and they raise money specifically for cancer centers in those communities. So the one in St. Louis was started by my wife, Kathy, and myself about 4 years ago, and it raises money for the Siteman Cancer Center here in St. Louis and funds researchers in St. Louis who are doing cancer research. So we can, people who donate to this swim know that it's benefiting people in our community.
You said that you thought you had a sports injury. Were you an avid swimmer?
Yes, I grew up swimming. I swam in college, and I was still swimming. I was doing triathlons and other things, which is why I thought it was a sports injury. My leg was hurting, so I thought I had a muscle bruise of some sort in my leg. I actually participated in a Swim Across America event in Dallas, Texas, prior to even being diagnosed with cancer. A friend of mine who I swam with when I was growing up lived down there and was involved, and he called me up and said, hey, there's this great lake swim event to raise money for cancer down in Dallas. You want to come down? And I said, great. So I already swam in Swim Across America for 2 years down in Dallas before I was diagnosed with cancer. And then when I started going through cancer, my wife, Kathy, said, we need a Swim Across America event here in St. Louis. And my response was, yeah, Kathy, that'd be great. Wouldn't it be great? But I really didn't think that it would actually happen. But she went and contacted the national people and figured out what she needed to do to get one going. And next thing you know, we're planning one. So it really has been a wonderful thing.
How can we learn more about Swim Across America?
Well, Swim Across America, is involved here in St. Louis. Our race is coming up Saturday on August 24th, and I'm swimming 2.4 miles with my daughter Jenna, who's 13. She and I are going to swim the 2.5-mile course in the lake. If you go to swimacrossamerica.org, it'll give you information on all the different swims around the country. So if anyone's interested, you probably can find one near you. And we're hoping to raise around $200,000, $215,000 for research here in St. Louis. And we have a researcher who we've already started giving money to, and we're going to go visit him as part of the event to take a look at his research on melanoma.
Great steps, great strides, lots of support. I'm glad that you could join us here on the program this evening.
Sure.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Mr. Walter Denton, talking about his sarcoma diagnosis and Swim Across America philanthropic effort. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program. Transcripts and audio of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast, listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our channel at youtube.com, Health Professional Radio.